Good morning, class. Welcome back. I hope you all had a great weekend. Today we're going to be picking up where we left off last week, which we had just finished talking about the American Revolution. We had started talking about the French Revolution and how that really picks up on the heels of the ideals of the American Revolution. And today we're going to be talking about the Haitian Revolution, which happens concurrently with the French Revolution. However, it lasts a few more years than the French Revolution, and it happens in the Western Hemisphere, primarily the goal being the abolishment of slavery. I'm going to be focusing on globalization and liberation in the Haitian Revolution. The first part identifies how processes of globalization led to the revolution itself, as well as the aftermath of the revolution. And the second is how the ideals of liberation that really develop and emerge out of this period we've talked about called the Enlightenment period, and how is it that Haiti really takes these ideals, puts them into practice, enacts a revolution that for the first time in the Western Hemisphere abolishes slavery. So here is an 18th century map from France of Haiti. Haiti used to be called by the French as Saint-Domingue. This island here is the island of Hispaniola. It is also where Columbus and his voyage first landed in the New World. It sits to the western side of the Dominican Republic. Let us look at the objectives for today's lesson a little bit more closely. So first is, in geographical terms, to give the relative location of Haiti. We've already started this by identifying that Haiti sits on the island of Hispaniola to the western side of the Dominican Republic. We're going to get a little more complex, but let us move on to the second objective, which is to locate the Haitian Revolution within the chronology of late 18th and early 19th century imperialism and global conflicts. So here we've already talked about the influences that the 7 Years' War had in really diminishing imperial powers and stretching them to their limits, such that there was a need to reformulate how imperialism was working in the Western world and how money was going to continue to be sent from this Western world back to Europe, back to the colonial powers, in a way that would continue to really enrich the Europeans. Lastly, we're going to look at how race and class tensions led to the struggle for the liberation of Haiti. So let's get a little more complex on that first objective, which is the relative location of Haiti. On this map here we see the Caribbean Sea. Haiti is right here and it sits on the Caribbean Sea. However, the Caribbean Sea is also broken up into two separate sections, which one is the Greater Antilles and the other is the Lesser Antilles. The Greater Antilles, the island of Hispaniola, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico all make up part of the Greater Antilles. The Lesser Antilles would be places like Barbados, Tobago, Martinique, Guadeloupe. What is important to understand here is that in the 17th and 18th century, all the way up to the 19th century, France has stakes in the Caribbean on both the Lesser Antilles as well as the Greater Antilles. So when I ask you on an exam, give me the relative location of Haiti, you can say it sits on the island of Hispaniola, it's in the Caribbean Sea, it makes part of the Greater Antilles. You can really give a wide range of answers here. Here's a closer look at the island of Hispaniola itself. Haiti again sitting to the west side of the Dominican Republic. And what I really want to point out with this map here is the city of Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince is the capital of Haiti, and it really sits on this bay here that we could kind of say is partially in the middle of the island. When I start talking about the breakout of the revolution in a little while, we will find out that it happens in these northern, more remote regions of Haiti, and then it moves down towards the more densely populated regions. Okay, so let's get our minds in that time frame that we have been talking about all semester long. We really started with the French-Indian Wars and the 7 Years' Wars. We talked about how the Treaty of Paris that settles this dispute really leaves France in a delicate position where it has had to give up some territories. It has been allowed to keep its most profitable territory, which is Saint-Domingue, nowadays what we call Haiti. But it's a little bit afraid of being able to maintain that stronghold after it has lost its military capabilities during the 7 Years' War to such a great extent. And this is really what we see the American Revolution playing off of, was the idea that Britain was a little bit weaker after the 7 Years' Wars. So we've talked about that also. And then how the French Revolution plays off the back heels of the American Revolution, and concurrently with the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution happens. We see that the French Revolution happens between 1789 and 1799, so about 6 years after the American Revolution, and during that same period, the Haitian Revolution begins, about 2 years after the French Revolution. But it lasts about 5 years more. I don't necessarily need you to focus on the dates here as much as in the processes and concepts that lead to this chronological redefining of ideas and ways in which to enact our ideals, to bring them about. Okay, so this is the slide with most likely the most information in it. I need you to pay the closest attention, write down everything. It is definitely going to be on an essay question. First, we're looking at globalization, so we're getting to our second objective here. And I want to really understand what we mean when we say globalization. And for the sake of easiness, let's think of globalization as international integration. Whenever I say globalization, you can just replace that word with the idea of international integration. However, I'm going to break down that idea of international integration into 3 separate categories. One is a social integration, economical integration, and then political integration. We see throughout history that international kinds of integration can happen in ways that both uplift and demoralize populations. Since here we're talking about the emergence of a revolution, it is likely that a lot of the integration we're going to be talking about is really one that is in conflict with one another, as opposed to more of a harmonious kind of integration. So under social integration, we have disparate civilizations in cooperation and conflict. An example here would be the French working with the Indians in the French-Indian War. We have the British, who are heavily invested in the transatlantic slave trade, who are bringing humans to be enslaved in their plantation systems in the Western Hemisphere. So this is leading to a certain kind of international integration, though it's one of conflict. And we also have economical integration, which here the example is the plantation system, which begins with indigo, heavily moves into sugarcane and coffee towards the late part of the 18th century. So the plantation system gets taken up by the British, it gets taken up by the French, it gets taken up by the Dutch. It really becomes a way of making money in the Western Hemisphere with enslaved labor. So we can see how there was a kind of international integration in economical terms as far as how money was being made in the Western Hemisphere. The last one is political integration. Here, the term integration is really misleading because it was political disjoinment more than anything. However, since it was all being forced onto the society that was subjugated, we can call it political integration by way of force. And the examples I want to give here are two different classes of people of color in Haiti that will come into play a little bit later when we start talking about other processes of globalization, but also leading towards liberation, which is libre de couleur as versus enslaved. So there were free men of color in Haiti. However, the free men of color in Haiti could never sue a white man, though you could bequeath and inherit property. So there's this really balance of power to where race is clearly existent within the social consciousness as well as the social environment, in a way that I cannot sue someone of the white race. I could not sue somebody else merely by means of my skin color. And so there's great racial tensions going on. However, I could pass on property, and I could also inherit property. And there are certain kinds of power that go along with that. And so the libre de couleur class is really sitting in this middle space, in this borderline between the enslaved population and the free whites. This becomes such a confusion in Haiti, it leads to such confusion for the dominant class, that in 1773 there brings about, the dominant class brings about this law that is a naming regulation. The second part here says, taken from the African languages. So if you had a child who had African ancestry, the French government in power of Haiti at that time would force you to name that child a name that is derived from the African languages, such that in our everyday environment we would know who's who based upon the origin of their name, where they came from, how they sit in a structured class society. So we can see that that's really a political integration that's leading to more conflict than it really is a harmonious kind of integration, but nonetheless, because it was forced, it was mandated by law, we can continue to view it as the idea of integration. The other part I want to bring into this idea of globalization is a little more regional. It's the idea of regional concentration and really the migration of methods and ideas. And an example here would be how the American Revolution influences the Haitian Revolution. The ideals of enlightenment come back to the Haitian Revolution, and then you have, for example, expeditions of Haitians that are going to Savannah, Georgia. I believe it was in 1779. This is even before the war begins, to help out in the struggles and the insurgency of the American Revolution. Those same insurgents come back to the Haitian Revolution and become oftentimes generals, leaders in different kinds of respects. And so there was a regional integration of action as well as of ideas that were migrating from one island to the mainland, back to the Eastern world. And so we have the breakout of revolution in September of 1791. I think this picture here really, again, kind of gives us those 1,000 words that perhaps we can't in writing. What I find is really peculiar about this image is that on these palm trees here we see several enslaved men or previously enslaved men who have climbed up the tree, and they're taking this advantageous position at the French military who's moving up the hill. So even having the higher ground kind of is demonstrating that advantageous position, maybe by way of knowing more about your geographical environment. The French are really coming in right off the ships. They don't know much about the land, but they know that their objective is to kill anyone who's black, and likewise for the black enslaved people of Haiti, their objective was counter to that, kill anyone who's white, and so it really becomes a racial war. But another thing to point out on this image too is that we see the Frenchmen who are moving from right to left with weapons, with swords, and we see the Haitian revolutionaries who are moving from left to right with, some of them have taken up weapons that they've taken from fallen Frenchmen, but most of them, especially in this first line of attack here, are really fighting with spears and stones. Let's give a little bit of context to the revolution. The population of Saint-Domingue, so Haiti, that initiated the revolution consisted mostly of African-born individuals who had made the Middle Passage, who had been part of the transatlantic slave trade as a first-generation, really person enslaved on a ship. Again, most of the population, so around 1790, 1 year before the revolution, it was estimated that the enslaved Africans who came from Africa and had made the Middle Passage made up 2/3 of the total labor force of the colony. So I think, I have a hard time imagining this, but this is someone taken from their own civilization on a 6-month voyage, being tied inside of a ship, to then come to what the Europeans are calling the New World, and initiating a revolution with really little hopes of ever being able to go back to where you formulated your personhood, yet having these ideals of becoming, of liberating, that would bring about a new kind of life. Again, the important point here is that the majority of the population who initiated the revolution were African-born individuals. In 1791, the revolution starts as a rebellion in the northern plantations of Saint-Domingue. I have a quote here that I find is really interesting. This is, we've kind of talked about throughout class about the original documents, things that were being written at the time as being an accurate representation of the events. And during this period, during this 13 years of war, there was a lot of refugees who came to the United States, specifically Baltimore. And as we know, Baltimore, we've talked about the narrative of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass himself lived in Baltimore. And so we see Baltimore as being this, if you will, this melting pot. And a lot of refugees from Haiti are going to Baltimore, and they establish different kinds of magazines and newspapers and publication means to talk about the Haitian Revolution to the rest of the refugees who are really interested in what's happening back in their home. And so this is a quote from an author who kept his name at Gross, G-R-O-S, but who published in Baltimore in 1792 for a newspaper called Précis Historique. He says, "Those who labor in the sugar plantations are more enraged than those who labor in the smaller coffee plantations." As I was talking about earlier, that northern part of Haiti is where really intensive labor focused around the production of sugarcane, which is extremely labor intensive, and as Gross points out here, the smaller kinds of coffee plantations maybe labor wasn't as intensive to spark up that initiative of revolution as the sugar plantations did. Another thing that you could also tie in with the objective of identifying processes of globalization is one of the major turning points in the battle against the French was the creation of a solid alliance between the ex-slaves, those that I talked about were two